So, you want to be a hunter? Well, this video series is about that very topic. I'm taking you on my journey from a little bit of history and then into where I am today. First of all, if you want to be a hunter, you probably were exposed to people who hunt. It wasn't something that you just dreamed up on your own necessarily, but it was because you were around people who did that sort of thing. I grew up in northern Maine, well above Caribou. Look at a map of Maine sometime and you'll see areas above Caribou and below Fort Kent that are pretty desolate. There's no fire departments, no police departments, no stores. It's just small communities of farmers and their families. And my grandfather and all of his brothers were all raised up there and they hunted. And I grew up in a very critical time in my life, say between 12 and 18, around people like that. People who had guns hanging on their walls and they trapped and they hunted and they did it for meat. They didn't do it for the racks on the walls, the trophy. And I was there during those years, and by the time I just got ready to graduate high school, we moved down into Connecticut. So just at the time when I was starting to get interested in hunting was the time we moved. So I got married a little later on, and I had two small children, and I had rifles that I had bought, and I was getting ready to do some hunting. I was planning on heading back up there to hunt with my friends that I grew up with, and because we had small children, my wife and I were kind of nervous about having guns around the house, and so, you know, I suppose we could have educated them and you know, kept them locked and everything, but the easier solution was just to get rid of them. I was real busy working and there was a lot going on, so I decided not to hunt. Well, fast forward to now. My kids, our kids, are in their 30s, they're married, they have families, and there's a little more time for me to consider going back to what I thought I would have liked to have done, and that is to become a hunter. So I'm chronicling my journey and hoping that some of what I'm going through will help you in the process. This first video is going to focus on some of the ideological perspectives, some of the things you have to think through in the very beginning. Like, for example, what kind of game are you going to hunt? Do you want to hunt ducks? Do you want to just plink at squirrels? Do you want to hunt bigger game like deer and elk and caribou and moose and black bear? And, you know, how much money do you have at your disposal? Do you have the ability to take a trip to Africa to hunt because you're very wealthy? Or do you just have, you know, a few dollars and all you can do is something local? I certainly can't go to Africa to hunt, so I'm not, you know, planning on any major trips like that. But I can certainly hunt locally, and there is some expense involved, and we'll talk about that part of this in another segment. So first of all, deciding what it is you want to hunt. And then once you've decided what it is you want to hunt, the next question, I suppose, that would be logical would be, well, what do you want to use to hunt with? Do you want to use a gun? Do you want to use a bow and arrow? What is your weapon of choice? And what comes into play there is, what are the regulations in your state? For example, here in Connecticut, you can use a shotgun, but you can't use a high-powered rifle. If you're on private land and there's more than 100 acres, you can use a high-powered rifle, but you have to have permission to hunt on that land. So deciding what prey you're going to hunt has a lot to do with what's around you relatively locally, and then what kind of weapon do you need to take that animal down. And I may mention from time to time a thing called clean kill, and what I've learned is that has to do with, you want to be a good shot, you want to be an accurate shot, and take that animal down quickly. You don't want that animal to suffer, and you don't want to have to chase it for hundreds of yards or a mile or two. So the idea here is, how can you harvest that animal and presumably I would encourage you to harvest it for the meat, not for the trophy. However, having said that, if I happen to be going after a deer and it happens to be a buck and he has a good rack on his head, I'd be tempted to take that rack and have it cut off and hang it on my wall, but that's not my purpose. That's not my intent. My intent is to hunt for the sake of the meat. So you've thought about you want to be a hunter, you've thought about the game that you want to hunt, you've thought about the weapons that it's going to take to kill that prey, and then you think about, well, now you've got to harvest this out of the woods. How do you do that? In my case, I'm interested in bigger game like deer, elk, caribou, moose. Those kinds of things are a bit bigger than shooting a pheasant and stuffing that pheasant into your backpack. So I'll spend a little time talking about what I've learned about field dressing and you know, the process of getting that animal out of the woods and finding somebody, if you don't do it yourself, to cut it up into the appropriate portions and getting it home and so forth. We're going to talk a little bit about the gear involved, not just the gun, but your backpack, what the kinds of things that you would have in your backpack for a trip. And if you look around on YouTube, you'll see plenty of videos of guys talking about what's in their gear bag. So if you want to skip ahead a little bit, you can always do searches for that. But I hope you stay with me, because this is a learning experience for me as I take from what I remember from the folks that I grew up around, and I apply that to today as I'm in my mid-50s, and I realize I probably don't have another 50 years of hunting in me. But for what time I do have, I'd like to do that. I love the outdoors. That's a big point. If you feel comfortable in the outdoors and you feel you've had some experience in the woods, which I've had a lot of, that goes a long way in helping you when you're out there hunting. I want to talk a little bit about hunting on your own and hunting with other people, and you know, the safety aspects of being in the woods and the kinds of safety gear that you have to have and so forth. A lot of this you may already know, but by watching me go through this as I'm going through it, I'm hoping that'll help you in preparing for your own journey towards hunting. In my case, it's now November of 2012, and my goal is to go out on a hunt as of October, November 2013. And I'm already taking steps in that direction. Obviously, I'm going to need to be licensed. And all the other things that we've talked about already have to be part of this, like, do I have all my gear? Have I chosen what kind of animal I'm going to hunt? Do I have the weapon for that animal? Have I been out to the firing range? And I want to talk also a little bit about, in the next segment, how you find gun clubs and firing ranges, and you know, what are the prevalent rates, at least around here. Zeroing in your weapon. Do you want a scope or not a scope? Learning a little bit about that particular animal, in my case, four-legged venison, caribou, elk, and moose. Learning about their habitat, the way they behave, taking the time to learn about their bedding areas, their feeding areas, and the things that will help me in finding them when the time comes to actually go on a hunt. And I'll talk a little bit about the choices I'm making about where I want to go on these hunts, which are within a couple hundred miles of me, well, at the most 500 miles. So I'm staying within a 500-mile window for the hunting I want to do. So that's So You Want to Be a Hunter, Part 1. Next time, we'll start talking a little bit more in depth about those kinds of things. And I'll be showing you the gear that I've chosen and things like that.